Happy 4th of July. I hope you're having a good week and hope you have some time with family and friends this weekend and celebrate the 4th of July and to be reminded how thankful we should be for the freedom that we enjoy, for the nation we live in, and also to be reminded that it didn't come free and that there were those who gave the ultimate sacrifice in order for us to enjoy those freedoms. I'm so thankful that the Lord has blessed our nation and pray that we would continue to seek Him as a nation and that our leaders would look to Him for guidance and direction. Well, we've been talking about the 23rd Psalm, and this week we're on Psalm 23:4. And I don't know whether we'll get through all of this today or not. But in Psalm 23:4, David, you remember I told you in past weeks, he's an old man when he writes the 23rd Psalm. He's looking back over his life and reminiscing of things that's happened to him in the past. In verse 1, he was recalling when he was a shepherd boy and took care of his daddy's sheep. And he said, because of that, he said, Lord, you give me everything I need. And then in verse 2, he said, not only do you give me the things I need, but you give me the things I want. Now, again, that doesn't always happen. We don't always get what we want, but we always get what we need. But there are those times when God just chooses to bless His children, not because we've earned it, not because we deserve it, not because we're worthy of it, but just because He loves us. And then last week we talked about He restores my soul and leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. He restores. He makes us new again. He takes away the old and removes that which is worn and splintered and restores us, makes us new. And today, David says in verse 4, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And again, the key to understanding this is to remember David is an old man reminiscing and thinking of things in the past. And as he gets to verse 4, he says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That phrase, valley of the shadow of death, was not just a picturesque explanation of words trying to be descriptive. It was the name of an actual physical location there in Israel. About halfway between Jericho and Jerusalem, 18 miles from Jericho to Jerusalem in distance, but the elevation is quite pronounced. You go up a long way when you go from the Dead Sea down to Jericho all the way up to the coastline on Jerusalem's level elevation. And right between there, about halfway between Jerusalem and Jericho, there's a place known yet today as the Valley of the Shadow of Death. It was a physical place. And the reason it got that name is because on that walk, that arduous walk uphill from Jericho to Jerusalem, about halfway there, you had to go through a deep canyon, and it was called the Valley of the Shadow of Death. The canyon was several hundred yards long, rock walls on either side of it, several hundred feet high, and the only time the sunlight reached the floor of that canyon was when it was high noon and the sun was straight overhead. All the rest of the time, morning and afternoon, that valley, that canyon, was in a shadow. No trees, no vegetation in that area, and the only place animals could go to escape the heat of the day was in that narrow canyon that was in a shadow. Wolves, lions, predatory animals, they would slip back in the caves and crags of those rock cliffs in order to get out of the heat of the day. But when a shepherd was taking his sheep, especially in springtime, taking his sheep from Jericho up to Jerusalem to the market to sell them, he had to go through that valley of the shadow of death. And with all the lions and wolves, it was like ringing a dinner bell for them. Here's a whole flock of lambs, and it was like lunch on the hoof. So shepherds did something very unusual that David would have remembered and would have done many, many times as he was a shepherd boy. When a shepherd, and you can stand there today and watch it happen, but when a shepherd enters that valley, he's got that long shepherd staff with a bell tied to the end of it, and he starts ringing that bell, hooping and hollering at the top of his lungs so that his sheep hear him, and he takes off running lickety-split and gets through that valley as fast as he can. Those little old lambs line up behind him, and they run. They follow him through there. Now, why does that shepherd run through there? Because he knows this. The faster you get those sheep through that valley, the safer they're going to be. You just wander along and just take your time going through there. That's going to give the lions and wolves more opportunity to attack the flock and kill some of the sheep. And so shepherds would never dare walk through that valley, but they ran through it, even yet today. I think David is remembering all the times he had to run through that valley with his sheep. But now he comes to the end of his life. And he says, Lord, because you're my shepherd, I've got everything I need. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, David was saying, God, because you're my shepherd, because you're the one leading me, because you're the one guiding and directing me, I don't have to worry about the things of the world. I don't have to worry about all of the harm the enemy wants to inflict on me. I don't have to worry because you're my shepherd and you're the one who protects me. And David is saying here, yea, though I walk. David, have you gotten senile? Dementia settling in? Boy, don't you remember when you was a shepherd, you're supposed to run through that valley? And David says, no. I've walked with God for a long time now, and I understand this. I can walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I can walk through this world. I don't have to worry about what the enemy or what the world has to throw at me. The Lord is my shepherd. I'm following him, and I can walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I think David here in verse 4 is remembering all the times he went up against things that looked impossible from a world's perspective. I think he's remembering the day when he stood across the battlefield from a guy named Goliath, huge giant, and all David's got is a slingshot. And he's saying, Lord, you took care of me. I think he's remembering every time as he was in a battle. You remember when he was a young man, after he was a shepherd, and after he slew Goliath, the giant, he was inducted into the army of Israel. And they used to go out on their military campaigns and come back, and the people would sing, Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. I think David's remembering every battle, every time his life was in jeopardy, every time someone threatened him. I think David is remembering all of those times. And I think he's remembering how God protected him, watched over him, took care of him. And David says, I've been through a lot in this world, but I can walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and I will fear no evil. In other words, when God is your shepherd, you don't have to fear what the enemy brings your way. And again, we don't earn it. We certainly don't deserve it. We're not worthy of it. But it's God's blessing of how he takes us and protects us and cares for us. And David goes on to say there, Lord, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, again, there's a meaning there that David would understand. And we've already exhausted our 10 minutes, so we'll have to pick up back on this next week. We'll talk next week about how the rod and staff protect us and give us comfort. Hope you have a great 4th of July. Hope you get to spend time with your family. God bless, and just remember this. If the Lord is your shepherd, you don't have to fear anything the enemy brings against you, because he is the one who defends you, he leads you, he guides you, he gives you comfort. God bless.